Hi, my name is Scott. I'm one of the pastors here at the Village Church in downtown Hamilton, Ohio. If you don't know anything about us, then we want you to know this, that we are a community formed by the gospel. And if you don't know what the gospel is, there's a million ways that I can unpack that for you. But simply put, the gospel is the fact that God saves sinners, right? And so how does that affect our community? How does that form our community? Well, here's one way. God is holy and perfect, and we aren't. God is creator, and we're creation. We're fundamentally different, more different than any other person you might meet on the street or meet here on Sunday morning. See, we are fundamentally different from one another, and yet what God does for us is He becomes like us in Jesus, and He invites us to become part of His family. He gives us a seat at His table, and everyone is invited to that. There's no one excluded from it. And so when we step back and we take a look at how the gospel should form our community, man, everyone is invited to be part of that. Everyone's invited to be part of what God is doing and who God is, and everyone has a seat at the table here at the Village Church. And so that's our ambition, that's our goal, and yet we know that as a church there are barriers to that. There's struggles that we have in becoming perhaps a radically diverse crowd, which should be the fruit of a community that is formed by the gospel. One of those barriers is race and racial division and racial injustice and racism and how race has shaped our communities and our neighborhoods and our religions and our faith and all those sorts of things. And so what we have been trying to do and striving to do over the last few months here at the Village is to kind of just dig into the conversation, the topic of race and racism, and what God might say to those things. What does the gospel say about those barriers? How does Jesus overcome those things? How does grace kind of uproot race and racism? And so as we've had those conversations, we've just realized how tough and delicate and difficult those conversations are, even more so than we thought at the beginning. And so with that said, we can choose to stumble forward in those conversations, or we could choose to let the stumbling that we might have in terms of stepping on each other's toes and saying things that are offensive even though we don't mean them to be, and maybe asking questions that seem dumb and all those things. We can let the fear of those things keep us back and keep us from engaging in that conversation and keep us from really pushing to see if God would shape us in that way as a community, or we can say, you know what, we're going to stumble, but we feel like this is a conversation worth having, and so we're going to press into that and stumble forward together anyway. And so that's where we've landed as a church, is to stumble forward together as we pursue what it looks like to become a radically diverse crowd, because we are a community formed by the gospel. Now, that's for our church. When we take a look at our community as a whole, we see race and racial injustice and those things shape our city, shape our neighborhood, shape our communities as well. And so as the church, we feel like we have a responsibility to kind of bring this conversation to the whole community, not on religious terms, not from a merely Christian perspective, but just to spark conversation and help the community see that behind the issue of race, it's really not an issue. There are people behind the issue that have stories and that have personal experiences and whose lives have been shaped in different ways, or maybe in seemingly minimal ways, by their particular race or culture or ethnicity. And so what we want to do, because we feel like it'd be good for the city as a whole, is to engage this conversation as well. We know that we're not the first ones to have this conversation. We know that we're not the first ones to kind of spur this dialogue, but we feel like that's kind of our faithful responsibility as a church, as someone who brings grace to the table, to kind of do this. And so on Saturday, December 3rd from 7 until 9 p.m. at Miami Hamilton downtown, we're inviting the public to come out for just to kind of peer into what a healthy conversation might look like around race and racism and racial injustice. We'll have a few folks from different races and different cultures there to have a moderated discussion, and they're not there to necessarily represent their whole ethnicity or the whole people of their particular race. They're not there with expertise. They're just simply there with individuals and people with a story whose story has been shaped by potentially their race or racism or racial injustice. And so we want to get those folks together and just allow them to have a healthy conversation around those things and allow us to kind of peer into that as well. So we invite you to come to that, to bring a couple questions maybe for the panelists, and to be willing to engage those who are around, who also come to see if they might have some of their own thoughts and to hear what their stories are and to get to know some other folks in our community. And so as we press forward in this conversation, I just want to invite everyone to be part of that. So if you would come and join us on Saturday, December 3rd from 7 until 9 at Miami Hamilton downtown. We would absolutely love to see you guys there as we strive to listen and learn and just humbly pursue what it looks like to love our neighbors better and invite everyone to have a seat at the table. Thanks, and God bless.